Good evening and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny panel for Environment, Communities and Partnerships. Starting off with the agenda, any apologies?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Alban and Councillor Hunt for this evening.
Thank you. So moving on to the minutes, item 1. Is everyone happy with the minutes from last month? Yeah, no issues? Thank you. Are you happy for me to sign? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Item 2, members' interest. Becky wants to clarify the members' interest because we've got a few items where I think some of us may have to declare an interest one way or the other.
So with the members' interest, obviously, I did obviously briefly as well. If anybody has a second property within the district, I think you would be advised to declare that as an interest given the council tax item that's coming up, and also whether or not that property is occupied by a tenant. And obviously, if there's any other items on there that you have an interest in, if you could let us know at this point, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
So has anyone got a second or third property? Councillor Motbull?
Yeah, I've got a second property in the district and it is occupied.
Lovely, thank you.
Anybody else? I'd like to declare an interest. I have 3 properties in the district. They're all occupied and none of them are furnished. So moving on to the Overview and Scrutiny working programme. Everyone had a look at it. We'll move straight into, anyone want to bring anything now up for discussion or they'd like to have considered for the programme?
I was going to say Councillor
Councillor Hassel?
Yes, I put a proposal form in for flooding.
Yeah.
So I think I submitted it to the to all members. So I think everyone has the opportunity to read my proposal. But in essence, it was to scrutinise the approach that we're taking to flooding and whether what we've done is sufficient, and also to look at riparian rights as well.
Yeah. Thank you. And Councillor Lowe?
Just to confirm, I have received that. Obviously, that came in after the agenda had been published. It's not noted on the planner as such, but we will be having a look at that, and obviously we'll be in touch with the panel as to how that might be able to move forward so that we can see on that one.
Yeah, I was just asking whether the HBO trial will be coming back to us.
I don't know as yet, but I will find out for you.
Thank you. Shall I just ask Councillor Tevlin?
Yes, that's a good idea.
Councillor Tevlin, we've just done a declaration of interest. Have you got any second properties in the area? No. Thank you. Anyone else want to bring anything for the working programme? Councillor Shaw?
Thank you. It's not particularly this committee, it's the subcommittee, the Climate Working Group. I've been made aware of some funding Net Zero Villages Fund, and I was wondering if it's perhaps possible to arrange a meeting of the group to discuss that.
Yes.
Yes, so I'm in the process. I've just asked for some more information from the officers to the length of time of the meeting, etc., so that we can get that into diaries for you. So I'm just waiting for a bit of detail on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Anyone else want to bring anything? Thank you. So moving on to item 4, council tax premium. We've got Councillor Ferguson and Katie to present it to us.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's about 673,000 empty properties in the UK. In the midst of a housing crisis, that's obviously not a good thing. It would be much better when we don't have enough houses for people, if some of those houses were brought back into use. I think there are other negative consequences of empty properties. They don't do very well for communities. If you're living in a road with lots of empty properties, then it's much more, the community doesn't flourish in those kind of places. So the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 gives us some opportunities to perhaps be more punitive to people who want to keep their properties empty for a long time. This is quite a complicated paper, but very well explained. So thank you to Katie for that. There's different types of empty properties. There's empty homes and there's second homes, and there's some technical differences between those things. But we have the opportunity to change the way that we discount council tax currently on those properties, and we can increase the amount of council tax applicable. The questions here is I guess how hard do we want to go on empty properties, and when do you want to do them? So for the second homes premium, we have no choice. We can't do it before April 2026, but there is potential with legislation change for the empty homes premium that we could put in some new conditions from next year. So Katie, do you have anything else to say on this? Or
No, I think that covers it, thanks, but happy to take any questions.
just to say that of the 670,000 properties in the UK that are empty, we think about 670, did we say, Katie, are in Huntingdonshire, so it's 0.1% of the total, but I guess every little bit helps.
Thank you. Everyone's read the paper. Has anyone got any questions to ask about it? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I mean, I support the implementation scheme. We've got a number of empty properties in Brampton. It's a popular village and they're just sitting empty because they're furnished. They're not, there's no premium, no incentive to get them back on the market. So just to clarify, because as I mentioned, it's quite a complicated report. So just to clarify, we're essentially proposing to reduce the unfurnished home premium from 2 years down to 1, and the same percentage applies. The 1 to 5 years would be 100% premium. Is that correct? Thank you. And then just again clarification on the other one, because the government proposal says that the local authority can charge up to 100%. Are we proposing to charge 100%, or is that going to be assessed on a case-by-case basis?
The proposal is to charge 100% on the second homes as well.
Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I support this proposal, but I just had a few points of clarification. Firstly, I noticed if you read the document, it's talking about properties that are unfurnished. I was just wondering what the criteria for something being furnished is. Sort of you just put a sofa in your empty house, is that classified as furnished? And I have a follow-up question as well. Oh, sorry.
Okay, in answer to that question, it's something that revenues and benefits teams quite often get challenged on. There's no legal definition of what would be considered as furnished or not. However, the officers would take a broad view about actually whether it's able to be lived in, whether it has sufficient furniture. So, for example, you would expect some white goods, a bed, a sofa, things like that. So it's sufficient for somebody to live there.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. And the other thing, so going back on Councillor Shaw's clarification, is that we're now moving it to 1 to 5 years. And I think the purpose of this is that I don't think any of us in this sort of state of housing crisis wants to have empty properties, and that's really the purpose of it. So is the 100% same as from 2 to 5 years currently, is that set by us or is that set by legislation?
We currently charge the maximum that's allowed by the legislation. So that 2 to 5 years is 100%, 5 to 10 years is 200%, and beyond 10 years is 300%, and that's the maximum that's allowed.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I was then going to propose moving it to 150%, but obviously you can't, so yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hassel. Anyone else? Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good report. And look, I echo what's been said. We don't want empty houses, but can I give you a scenario, because it's in my constituency. Sadly, I lost a good friend who has no next of kin other than a distant relative in Canada, and it's been quite tricky through probate. It's been very, very, very sensitive. if it gets to the point and the housing market, and I can only use my own observations, slowed down a little bit, you know, the houses are starting to slow down. What happens to a family if they get to sort of 14 months having tried to sell the house? It's furnished because obviously they're still trying to get rid of some of the furniture. What happens in that case?
So the proposal that's coming forward at the moment, at the time of writing the paper, we didn't have the details of the exceptions from central government. And so the proposal was put forward for an agreement in principle to charge those at the moment, with that policy development coming later, but before the actual premiums come into effect. There are exceptions there, so for probate and for those that are genuinely trying to sell their properties. The guidance that's come out this week from central government has said to local authorities that we can consider if there is further discretion that we'd like to put around that side, if people are genuinely trying to sell. So we can consider individual circumstances, but that part does need to be worked through in policy development to understand what that might mean.
That's great. And look, I support the paper. I guess is just how do we communicate that to, you know, anxious relatives, you know, people who are a little bit concerned. They're thinking, oh, my property's been empty. I'm going to get. How's that going to be communicated to those individuals?
As it stands at the moment, if any decision is made by council to charge those premiums, we need to put a notice in the paper anyway. The proposal is that we give at least a year's notice of this coming in, with both of those charges coming in with effect from April 26. So there is a large amount of notice there that would be given.
Thank you. During the briefing, we raised that subject as well, and I was quite keen on the exemptions because they're quite sketchy in the paper. And it's a possibility, if anyone's got interest, for us to set up a working party to work with the officers to look at the exemptions, because we've got a year. So if anyone is interested, let me know. Yeah, we'll discuss it later. Councillor Lowe and then Councillor McAdam.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree. I think the paper's great. My only question is similar to Councillor Bywaters. What about people that are in care or in nursing homes? And the firm, you know, I know it's got about probate, but this is all before, obviously, probate and things. Because obviously it can take a while to get the house on the market, depending on what the conditions are and everything else of the person that's in care.
So there is a specific exemption already built into council tax law anyway. So where a property is left empty by somebody who's living elsewhere, so they've moved to receive care, that property is exempt, provided no one else lives there, from council tax. And as it's exempt, it wouldn't be charged the premium.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor McAdam.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what's being proposed, but I'm just curious about, okay, we've got 2 years, 5 to 10 years and 10 years plus. Do we have any flexibility or ability to change those time spans? For example, could we make it 8 years plus and bring it, 2 years back? Are we allowed to do that?
I'm afraid not. Those time limits and the amounts are set in legislation.
Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, just one final point of clarification. I think it says in the document, however, as part of the policy that will be developed, owners may be required to provide evidence of the marketing and valuation where this appears to be inflated in order to benefit from the exception. So it's kind of the other side of the argument. Is it written in that way, saying that you just don't have the information, or is that something that we could strengthen in the document?
So the guidance from central government is that it will be for local authorities to determine what is being actively marketed for sale. So that is one area where we do need to consider within the policy what evidence it is that we're looking for. So we would want to receive applications from those in that position that shows that their property is being actively marketed with perhaps local estate agents, or they may provide an EPC to show that their property is ready to be sold, but that's an area that we are able to develop.
So just to come back on that, as a committee, do we need to make a recommendation that that piece of the document is actually tightened, that you will do that, because I think it's important, or is that something you think is going to happen anyway?
It's really important for us that we have some clear lines about what the expectations are on evidence. We wouldn't want to be in a position where somebody just says that the property is being marketed for sale without us seeing evidence of that. So that will be built in anyway.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. This one just occurred to me, so forgive me. So if a house has been empty, I can't remember the date that this is applicable from, so you have to forgive me. So if a house is empty for, say, 1 year, and then this comes into force, would that household have the 2 years, or would the 1 year then apply to it? Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you.
It does make sense. It's the date that the property became empty rather than the date that the policy is applied.
Has anyone got any other questions? I've just, Councillor Ferguson, just a minute. I've just got something from Councillor Hunt, because he can't be here. He's apologised, and he said he's really supportive of it, and it's been a long wait. He's very keen for, this, for it to come, the proposal to come forwards. One thing he's asked is, while it's hard to have exact numbers on empty properties in the district, would it be possible for an update, given the numbers of the properties falling under the scheme, after it's been in place for 12 months, and would it be possible for this to be included as a recommendation to Cabinet? Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
So just to say, I mean, it's been a good discussion. I think there's lots of agreement. I think Councillor Bywater's comment about being compassionate in the way we do this is really important too. So if you are minded to form a working party to help to make sure that, you know, that we are of a single mind in making sure that while we bring as many unused properties back into use, that we're also compassionate in the way we do. I think that's really important. So if you're minded to do that, I would welcome it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Obviously, Councillor Hunt's not able to be here, but obviously you've heard that he's suggesting that there's an additional recommendation to go into the ONS comments. Would somebody like to propose and second that, and then we can take a vote on whether you would like to include that within the papers or not? Councillor Mokbel and Councillor Lowe, would you like to? Sorry, the first two hands I saw there. And if I could just reread what has been written so that we're clear on what it is you're being asked.
Would you like me to read it out?
I can do, I don't mind. So that it's that
After 12 months.
after 12 months, a
of the
detail
scheme.
would be brought back as to the
The numbers.
numbers of empty properties left after the implementation of the scheme. If we're clear on that, could I take a show of hands of those in favour of adding that in as an additional recommendation? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Lovely, thank you. Just for argument's sake, a show of hands for against? No? Thank you. Right, we'll add that in.
Has anyone else got anything to add before we move on? Thank you. We'll now move on to item agenda 5, council tax support, and we're still with Councillor Ferguson and Katie.
Thank you, Chair. So, about a year ago, we put forward a new council tax support scheme, which would increase the maximum discount that people would have to pay on their council tax. The most people in need in the district to 100%. Previously, the maximum we could give, apart from in very special cases, was 80%. I think the numbers in this report speak for themselves. So, to go through some of those, under the previous scheme, we had about 1,300 people receiving 100% council tax support. That's up to nearly 4,000 people now. We've also enabled an extra 708 households to receive council tax support compared to the previous year. We've also done that while significantly reducing the administrative burden. So we had 10% reduction in the council tax bills being sent out of this, and that obviously reduces the amount of confusion from people who are getting constantly changing council tax bills. The proportion of changes we were able to process automatically rose from 30% to over 62%. And that has a great benefit for residents who are claiming these benefits, because the number of days required to process the changes in circumstances has reduced now from 8.78 days to just 3.42 days, which means people get more help. And I think perhaps, I mean, it's one of the bottom figures in this, but one of the most important figures here is that we issued 615 fewer reminders and 527 fewer court summons. So, people who are on the edge of debt or in crisis, that is a particularly pernicious, getting letters from the council. So the fact we've managed to reduce that is also an excellent result. So I think this has been, from my point of view, a complete success. Obviously, the original paper we brought you last year involved a large amount of modelling, and we didn't know exactly how it would turn out, but the first year's results have been incredibly good, and I think demonstrate, that we're fulfilling one of our objectives, or trying to fulfill, preventing people from entering into crisis and helping people who are already in crisis. The scheme has helped people in need claim more money more quickly and with less administrative burden. Thank you very much.
Has anyone got any comments or questions? And I'd just like to thank you again for the scheme. I'm glad it's been successful, and I can see with the figures it's working. This is one of those items where I think we can now agree that this sort of item doesn't need to come to us, and I think we've got... Becky, did you want to add something about it?
I was just going to say, going forward, obviously, with part of the self-scrutiny subject that this panel and the other panel has been doing, we will be looking at the reports that come through on a pre-decision scrutiny basis, and we will be starting to formulate that into the work programme and pushing back on officers as items come to us, so that we can then give some rationale as to why items aren't necessarily coming to the panel, if not necessary, so that you'll know in advance. But obviously that will be part of the implementation that will be happening imminently, so that we can start to move that forward.
That doesn't mean to say that if that's the decision, but we want to see them, we can still ask for them to be brought forwards. Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, I do think in this particular instance that it's really helpful to bring this in front of scrutiny, having been responsible for bringing the Garden Waste Subscription Service to this very committee. I think it's really important that we emphasise that, some of the criticisms of perhaps the downside of the Garden Waste Subscription Service, whereby some people may not have been able to afford to continue with a green bin, and the argument against that was this very scheme. So the fact that this scheme has, I suspect, reached far more people than just effectively subsidising a green bin, which, let's be honest, if you are really short of money, you perhaps would target something other than a green bin just to spend the money on. So it's good. I was kind of interested to see, I noticed in the report there weren't actually that many figures in there in terms of costs and things like that. So I'd be kind of interested to know what the increase in cost between the old scheme, where we were basically only subsidising up to 20%, and the new scheme of what the actual cost to the council is, which is kind of another reason why I think it's kind of important for us to take a look at it from time to time at ONS, because I think I really wanted to know whether you hope that this whole scheme will stabilise. It's increased by about 50%, I think, in the last 12 months, but you would want it to stabilise, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want this to carry on increasing.
Yeah, I echo that, Councillor Hassel. And actually, I remember when you brought it to us, you said actually the cost of chasing people because they couldn't afford to pay was actually substantial. It would be useful to see those figures too.
So the cost of providing council tax support actually forms part of the tax base. So each year we'll set out the number of dwellings across the whole district. There'll be deductions taken for other discounts and exemptions, so single person discount, any other exemption, along with an adjustment for council tax support. So we do that each year anyway. We are tracking this through to see where we're now sitting with those predictions and whether we're on track or not. And despite that uplift, we're still confident that we're going to meet that forecast by the end of this financial year. Now, we're currently in the process of working out our tax base projections for next year, again, which will include that element of what's the impact on the tax base. But looking at it as a cash sum, you can't necessarily compare because all of the charges have gone up.
Yes, I guess my concern about it is it's not really a concern. It's more of a key risk indicator, if you like. Is that if we continue, if this keeps kicking in, it's gone up by 50%, then it shows as an underlying concern in our general populace, and I think that's a really important thing for us to keep an eye on.
Has anyone got any other questions or comments? Councillor Ferguson.
So certainly, this hasn't been in place for a year yet, and so when we get to April and we've done, the number crunching, we can come back and with those accurate figures, because I think it is important. Because I think 6 months ago, Katie and I have a regular call, and we were talking about the costs increasing. That hasn't, I think, what happened in the time so far, but it is a risk that could happen in the future as well. It's also worth saying that the cost of this isn't borne entirely by Huntingdonshire District Council. It's by all the precepting authorities, so County Council mostly, Police and Crime Commissioner, Fire Service and the mayoral precept as well will all be reduced, and also, of course, all the town and parish precepts. So everybody is kind of chipping in from this. And I think when we bought the original paper, I think it was going to cost about £1 million in council tax collected across the whole of Huntingdonshire, but that most of that would come from County Council precepts and not from us.
Any other questions or comments? Well, on that, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. And again, I'd just like to echo, it's a policy which actually really does target the people who need it the most. Those people that were falling outside of the borders. So thank you.
Can I just say, Chair, that one of my proudest political achievements is having my picture on the front of the Hunts Post saying HDC abolishes council tax for the poor. Of course, little of that was due to me. It was mainly down to Katie and the Revs and Ben's team. We did it on an extremely tight timescale. So, the fact that it's been a success is all down to them. So thank you very much to the team.
Thank you. So moving on now to agenda item 6, One Leisure PV solar installs. Got Matthew and Kerry and Lara and Finn.
Good evening, councillors. So really delighted to be presenting this paper this evening. So I've got with me, obviously, Lara Davenport-Ray, Councillor Davenport-Ray, who is our Executive Portfolio Holder for Climate and Environment, and Matthew Raby, who's our Facilities Manager for Hard Services, which basically means stuff rather than people. I think that's my understanding. Structures, things. And then Kerry Slater, who is our Energy and Sustainability Officer. So we are on a pathway to net zero by 2040, and that involves some really tough decisions, some really sort of balanced weightings of outcomes and benefits, looking into the future to try and understand when technologies may develop and change and when things may become more or less affordable. This one is rather simpler in my mind, and we're looking at making an investment as soon as possible that's going to have a payback within just over 8 years. So that's a 12.1% return on investment. I think regardless of our climate strategy, we would just do this. It's very rare to have anything that's got a predicted return on investment that generous. I don't see any reason why we'd expect our electricity costs to plummet in the next 8 years. And so quite possibly it'll be sooner than that if energy prices continue to rise in the way they have recently. So the report recommends the Big Bang approach, which is essentially to get on with it as quickly as possible, which I fully endorse. And I'll hand over to our subject matter experts. If you want to add any words, otherwise we'll go to questions. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt.
Middle button.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I've just put together a couple of slides with Kerry so that we can give you a brief overview. You've all had the paper, but I thought it was good to see some of the numbers, not only savings, but as well as the carbon savings. So the proposal, as you know, is to install roof-mounted solar panels at One Leisure Huntingdon dry side, One Leisure Ramsey, One Leisure St Neots, and the St Ives outdoor. Different order than as they're pictured, as you can see, but there's the indicative designs. Some of those sites already have solar on them, but following a review, we've identified that there is the potential to install more, which are as per the pictures. I will note that it is subject to the final roof loadings, so design, so it could change marginally, but I would expect the payback to be in line with what we're recommending today. On to the next slide, if you can. So overall, the investment that we're looking for is £412,000. We've included a contingency and some project management costs in there as well. As we've already noted, the average payback is a touch over 8 years, with 231,000 kilowatts saved approximately per year, £60,000 and 40 carbon tonnes. So we've based this on a worst case scenario with our current utility pricing about 25p a kilowatt. All the sites differ slightly, give or take point of a pence, but we've predicted over the 25 years within our submission that it will stay the same. Now, I'm pretty confident to say that the electricity cost will increase somewhat over the next 25 years. So although that's indicating a total financial saving of 1.4 million, actually, I would hope that it would increase based on the utility costs. That summarises just a brief summary of the report and open to any questions. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Shaw?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm all for proposal 2, big bang, get it done. Obviously, it mentions that there's no sort of provision for feedback terrace or battery storage facilities on the system. Do you want to cut in there? And then I'll let you go.
Sorry, I was meant to mention that. So due to the connection times of UKPN, we've decided not to include the export at the moment. We want to look to get this installed. Once we know the system's been installed, we'd understand a little bit more about the surplus that we've got. Depending on that surplus, we can then look at either export meter and go through the application for that, or look at battery storage. Both are options that are available. Batteries obviously have an extra cost, but that would be looked at as a site-by-site basis.
Sort of answers my question within. I was going to say, obviously, with no feedback, no battery storage, we've got a plan to sort of balance the usage with the generation, if you like, so nothing's wasted.
So the designs have been based on our half-hourly data. So we sent an independent consultant our half-hourly data for each of the leisure centres, and they've designed the pictures attached based on our utility usage. So they show over a 75% return. Again, based on final design, when we've got that, we can give a bit more accurate information.
Councillor Lowe, then Councillor Hassel.
Thank you. Just a quick one on the battery storage. There are plenty of other options for storage. For example, sand. I don't think we'd probably want to use water, but I'm just sort of thinking trying to avoid lithium, because obviously when it's mined, it's not great for the environment or the people mining it. But my question was, end of life cycle, what happens to the panels and how much is recyclable?
I totally understand your point about looking at other options than batteries, and that could certainly form part of our investigations when we get to that point. I would have to come back to you on the panels in terms of recycling percentages, and that's something that we can look at and feed back.
Councillor Hassel?
Yeah, just wanted to say thanks to Matt and Kerry for pulling this together. I know we discussed this at length in the past. Just looking through the proposal, I think it's a really good proposal. There is a little bit of bundling in the proposal, because I noticed that the St Ives Outdoor has a 12-year return, whereas everything else is 8-year, and that probably puts it outside of our Salix recycling fund. Is that right?
Sorry, so yeah, what I've done there is, as you can see, the outdoor has a payback of about 12 years. As a standalone project, I still think a 12-year payback on an investment of, is it 52,000, would still be a good return. Our Salix funding, I've just used that as an example within the paper, is a normal instant green light for when we were using our Salix recycling pot was if it paid back within 10 years. And that was always as a collective rather than an individual as well. So it's better to put it into a bundle rather than leave it as a standalone project, because obviously project costs would probably go up due to doing it as a standalone, so it's better to include it within the four.
So are you saying that by effectively bundling it, we get a Salix benefit because they would just look at the overall return of the project rather than the individual component?
Yes, that's correct. I will clarify, this is not from Salix funding though. This is from council reserves. So it's what I did there was just indicate that in the last 15 years of our Salix recycling pot, that anything with a less than a 10-year payback would automatically effectively be accepted. So it's just more of a reference point to say the project has an excellent payback.
Yes, so just to kind of come back to my original point then, with a 12-year payback, and we've had the discussion from Councillor Shaw around battery usage and the like. If we have £52,000 to spend, and there are other factors in terms of solar's like to get more efficient and probably cheaper and so on and so forth coming going forward. I guess my counter proposal, scrutinising this whole sort of thing, would it be better to ask Cabinet to consider whether they want to go ahead with the St Ives Outdoor and unbundle it? And if you did have that 52,000 to spend, would it be worth modelling battery storage or something like that, which actually might get a better return for council, better value for money? Sorry, I was making that rather long-winded, but I think you get the picture of what I'm saying.
I think Matt's going to let me take this one. So in the paper in front of you, there are 3 options proposed. The recommended option is delivering the Big Bang approach, but the third option, deliver a phased approach, I think that's what you're referring to, that we might choose some of the options first and do more investigations, or not spend all of the capital all at once. So what we're looking for from Scrutiny is, what is your opinion? When this comes to Cabinet, do you think Cabinet should approve a Big Bang approach or not?
I think I'm being a bit more subtle than phased approach. I'm just basically saying there's one element of the proposal. I'm all for Big Bang, do it all in one go. There's one element of the proposal which has a much longer return than the rest of it, and that effectively, if you didn't do that, that frees up 52,000 that you could spend, for example, on batteries.
So I think, it's a point well made. I think the argument for doing as proposed is that obviously if we left that part of it out and actually you had separate contingency management, contingency is probably proportional, isn't it? But the management fees and procurement, all the rest of it, to do them all as one, it reduces the overheads, the fixed overheads of the whole project. But I think, your proposal is a coherent one, and that could be something that this panel recommends. So I welcome that challenge, and it's something that Cabinet can consider.
Because I'm saying the reality is the St Ives Outdoor is a really small part of the overall project. So I still recommend going big bang. I'm just sort of saying 52,000 buys you quite a lot of batteries, which means that you could effectively be powering those leisure centres overnight as well as during the daytime, which is where you're going to use it, and there would be less pumped out into the grid, so more benefit to HDC.
Just to say that if we did go down that route, obviously we would have to then look at the arrays slightly different, because the way that they've been factored from the initial design is that they've been sized accordingly. So if we were looking to store some within batteries, which is an unknown percentage at the moment, we might need to increase the array so that we've actually got a certain allowance to be able to store within the batteries. Does that make sense?
Well, sorry, it raises another question: is that why you're not maxing out on the arrays? Surely we do want to be putting the maximum amount of solar onto the roofs as possible.
That is purely based on the design that we initially set out to complete, which was to use as much of the array as possible. So during the so it's been more designed for summer months than winter months, because obviously we will produce a lot more electricity during the summer than the winter.
Yeah, I'm just thinking you would put the maximum array so you get the maximum amount of power in the summer and the winter, so to make use of all the available space with the most efficient solar panels that you possibly can. The problem with solar is in the summer you get too much. You use more than you get more than you actually need, and in the winter you don't get enough, and you only get it in hours of when it's light. So in essence, battery storage in combination helps massively, because then you can use it at night and I think we all know that. So I shall be quiet now and stop haranguing you. Apologies.
I'll just come back on that. I think that profile is true of residential, but if we look at somewhere like the Ramsey Leisure Centre, where we're running air source heat pumps, the amount of solar that we can create, even if we use the maximum of the roof, would be used by us. So the need for solar battery capacity is not necessarily the same as the variables that you would consider in a residential situation, because we're such a large user of electricity at leisure centres.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport and Ray. That does make sense. Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you very much. I actually support this. I think we see about solar panels all the time, especially when we're using prime, or developers are using prime agricultural land to stick solar farms in. I think the district council doing this is setting an example that we utilise in buildings, and I think personally we should be sticking solar panels on more of our buildings as opposed to using our valuable agricultural land that surrounds us in the district. I get Councillor Lowe's point in relation to just lithium batteries and the recycling. So if we can feed back on that, but also Councillor Hassel makes some good points. I think we need to see this again at Scrutiny as this progresses. I support it. I think it's a good idea, but we need to understand, because technology changes really, really quickly. From the days when we were sticking solar panels here and over at Shire Hall when we were discussing that years ago. So it'd be interesting to understand what is also available. So I think it's really crucial that we see this back here in 12 months. I'll let you be, or the committee be, the judge of when we see it. But I think we do need to monitor it, because this is a long-term project that's going to be, a big investment for this district.
It is. Councillor Shaw, then Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. It's sort of not quite on the same vein as Martin's, but similar. I was just looking at the costs of the installation and the payback periods, and obviously Huntingdon's cost is quite similar to St Ives' cost, but the payback period is much longer. I was wondering why that was. Is it because the site uses electricity, or less electricity, or is it because the higher importation costs from the grid?
I would need to double check the data on that, but with One Leisure, sorry, was it St Neots?
Cost, but greatly different in payback. That's the gist.
Yeah, sorry. I think with the systems, there's always kind of an initial outlay in terms of predominantly getting trades on site, and there's always going to be costs associated with that. And with St Ives, obviously the usage of the energy is a little bit more sporadic than it would be at Huntingdon. Huntingdon is much more consistent in terms of it opens at early morning, closes later at night, and it's kind of always got gym equipment running. There's always lights on, where the outdoor is a little bit more sporadic in its kind of opening hours.
Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. My question is this the first sort of phase of renewable electricity generation? Because obviously you've got, with the smaller wind turbines for buildings, would you be considering those at a later date once this has been finalised and completed?
So with the solar panels, we've obviously had the successful input at Eastfield House, which has proved itself, and also some of the leisure centres already have panels that went on. I think it was 2016, 2017. This is, you're right, more of a first stage for renewables, where we've taken the opportunity to look at the big users and have some good results. And part of this actual was to look at here more at Eastfield House, but because of the limited space we've got here with all the plant on the roof, we have had to kind of just put that into touch. What I can share is we have started to look at the vertical access wind turbines. From our first findings, unfortunately the payback is longer than the actual capital cost to buy. So that was just an application for here, actually, for Pathfinder House. I did look at putting some on the roof here, and we got some paybacks. And I'm happy to share that data. But effectively, we were about 10 years short on a 30-year payback, 20-year lifespan. So we've kind of parked that up at the moment, but there is possible further installations, because for me, solar works great when it's light. What about all the evenings? And there's always a baseline data at all of these sites. They all have swimming pools. They all use electricity overnight. So it's finding that best application. I'll also note, we are looking at a building energy strategy, which will hopefully include some of that a little bit more and give us a bit more of a steer on where we can focus.
Councillor Motball, then Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you, Chair. How come we're not considering the car parks for solar panels like we've got in St Ives Park and Ride?
Yeah, so hopefully you're aware we are installing a car park canopy at One Leisure St Ives indoor. Work that has been awarded through the Sport England funding that we received, and that's due to be completed, I will touch wood, by the end of March next year. And we're looking at a 220 kilowatt peak hour system for there, which will show some great returns. As part of this study, we did look at the canopies, but due to the steelworks and the framing and the civil works attached to that, it effectively doubled the payback periods, because this is just placing it on a fairly simple grid onto a roof. So that's why we've particularly focused on roof mounted within this project.
Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. I support this project, and I think it's good that to see again the move towards having more solar panels. It's also good to see that you fully costed it in terms of the fact that there will be needing maintenance costs on an annual basis. It's disappointing to see that the government, there is no available funding from the government. What is the process or any sort of forward plan towards looking at getting funding towards this? Have you got any sort of plans to get funding or engagement sessions with stakeholders, etc.? Thank you.
So I know Lara's itching to comment on this one as well. I'm just going to say that, so I think there are lots of things we need to do as a country, as a planet, to decarbonise. Some things pay for themselves, and we should just do those quickly, because frankly, when the government steps in, we want to leave them all the really hard things to do. So the stuff that we can do and pays for itself, I'm really happy that we just get on with, because there's going to be plenty of other challenges for us as a council, as a country, to grapple with. And we may need to have, more central government funding. Having said that, obviously it's brilliant that we've got the 700,000 to fund the solar canopy in St Ives indoor. So there's always a mixture, but I think when there's an opportunity to do something, we should just crack on.
So I'd like to kind of step back and talk about the basics of this again from the beginning. Of what we're proposing to Cabinet is that we use 412,000 from the capital reserve. So rather than waiting for a grant, to use it from our capital reserves of our council. And then in return, once it's completed, every year we'll save £60,000 on utility bills and 40 tons of carbon. So if you remember the climate strategy that we approved 2 years ago, it's really important that we think about the financial costs and the environmental costs. And it's actually quite rare that you find a project with such a short payback period where you can see the carbon benefits, and after it's paid off, we will still have, well, on today's rates, £60,000 worth of savings in utility costs. So that's why we've decided to push ahead with this and ask Cabinet to use council reserves, because we think it's such a good opportunity. But you're right that usually we would wait to do projects like the solar canopy when we saw government grants that were available to do them.
Councillor Shaw, you had a question.
Last one, I promise. Under section 5, page 56, you've got a timetable for implementation. Has the tender process started, and or has anyone been selected?
Yeah, so effectively what we've done is, following the award of the canopy at One Leisure St Ives indoor, we have not included the full package of this, but effectively included within that tender that we can award to that contractor. So providing that we get approval at Cabinet for the spend, our process will be to engage. We're already engaged with a contractor, and it actually works really well with the timings, because we're in the process of finalising the outlet as well as sorry, I lost my train of thought, as well as sort of waiting for panels. So it's a really good opportunity to engage them, to get them to do the structural works, and then finalise the design ready to phase into that in the new year.
Are they a local company?
I would need to confirm their exact location, so not specifically local.
Okay, my train of thought was I was hoping to perhaps propose that greater weight was given to businesses that are located within the district in the tender process, which would align with the community health and wealth building strategy. That was my thinking.
Thank you. So it strikes me we've got a couple of options and we've been asked for recommendations. On balance, I think all of them personally should go forwards because though there's less savings in St Ives on the outdoor leisure, it's still good savings. And in the package, I can't see it could become any cheaper because it's outside of the package as a standalone. So I'm happy to support the whole package, but I'd like a feel for anyone else's perspective. Matthew?
Sorry, I just wanted to come in. They're Northampton based. Relatively local in terms of some contractors, yeah.
It was just my thought that perhaps, you know, in line with keeping our revenue and investment within the district would be a good recommendation to take to full council, perhaps.
Just quickly, because I couldn't find it in the pack. The return on the 450,000, the return on investment is the annual return on investment from spending the money.
Sorry, it is on their year 25, 1.42 million.
Sorry, as a percentage, yeah, sort of as a compared to the base rate.
By my maths, that's 12.1% per year. 12.1.
So just moving on to what I was saying, the other thing I was taking into consideration is that the carbon saving as well for the one leisure outdoor facility in St Ives. Has anyone got any other ideas or views they want to share on this?
So I think obviously everybody's had comments. I didn't know if there's obviously 3 options outlined within the paper. Did anybody want to propose and second to support any one of those 3 options? Option 2.
To option 2. Yeah, and that's where I was coming from as well.
Bear with me 1 second and we'll just... sorry, Dave, you're... There we go. So with that being proposed to support option 2, could I take a show of hands to see who's in support of that, so we can add that into the comments that everyone's in support of that? And were there any other, thank you, and were there any other suggested recommendations or additions to the report that you wanted to add in?
Just my comment in relation to when would we see it back here, really?
That's noted, yeah.
Anyone else got any other comments before we finish on this item? Councillor Motbull?
Sorry, is that including Dave's recommendation of...
No.
No.
That would need to be proposed and seconded if you wanted to include
Do you want to do that and I'll second you?
Try again.
So I'd like to make a recommendation that we give greater weight to...
You want, just pop your mic on, that's it.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we give greater weight to proposals or tender applications for businesses located within the district.
Councillor Motbull, were you happy to second
Yeah,
that?
happy to second that.
And can I have a show of hands for anyone supporting that?
And those against?
Anyone against?
And any abstaining?
Anyone got any other comments before we finish this item? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
The second recommendation you've made, you may remember that in the climate action plan for our council, we have an action to look at our procurement strategy for the council as a whole, not just for this project. And so that topic is not just about waiting for environmental issues, but for social issues as well. So I think that's another place where we could have that discussion about procurement.
Well, thank you all for your presentation, and thank the rest of the panel for the contributions too. So moving on to item 7, Priority 1 Delivery Update, Quarterly 2. And we've got Councillor Pitt and Claudia. Alison. Okay. I won't mention.
Thank you very much, councillors. So I have with me for this agenda item, so we have Claudia Death, who's the Community Services Manager. Alison Riley is our Resident Advice and Information Team Leader. And Dorcas Wan, who is our Service Design Lead. So thank you to all of you for joining me today. So as per our last quarterly report, we are proposing to give you an overview with some statistics that you've already received to kind of give an overview of the bundle of works that sits within this Priority 1 area of activity, but then also to introduce you to some of the team. In this occasion, it's all HGC staff, but to talk about something, go into some of the detail and sort of bring to life some of the work that we're doing. I can't remember whether we explicitly established that as a regular way of working, but if this works for you, that would be great to understand. If there's anything else you'd like us to do differently, we'll obviously be keen to hear. And also, if there's anything specifically within the sort of wider report that you'd like for us to bring back next for the next quarterly report, we'd be very keen to have that feedback. There's a couple of extra slides that we've got in the presentation we'll be sharing with you this evening on top of what you've already had received, so hopefully that'll be useful to you. Other than that, I'll hand you over to Claudia. Thank you very much.
Good evening all. It's great to be back, and hopefully this time the presentation is a bit more timely. So our update is for Q2, so July to September, and we'll be talking through all of the projects that make up Priority 1. So two members of my team here this evening, so Dorcas and Alison, will talk specifically about the work of the Resident Advice and Information Team. So you'll see within the slides, there's lots of other information. I will go through those slides and provide a brief overview, because we'd really like to focus some time this evening and give you the opportunity to hear more about the team and the day-to-day activities that they're involved with. So just a reminder in terms of what we're here to do. So we'll provide an update in terms of progress on the activities during Q2, outline our plans for Q3, but also this is an opportunity to seek feedback from yourselves and also hear about things that you're seeing locally, anything that you're hearing from your residents about the work that we're doing, and where we could touch more of the community. So in terms of Priority 1, the focus is improving the happiness and well-being of residents, keeping people out of crisis and helping people in crisis. And you heard earlier from Katie and Councillor Ferguson around the council tax support. We work really, really closely with Katie's team, and again, Alison will touch on that in her presentation. So the projects that make up Priority 1 is the work of the Resident Advice and Information Team, Citizens Advice, Asset of Community Value, Support to Refugees, Bundle of Offers, Food Support, Health Interventions, Community-Based Employment and Skills, the Community Chest and Domestic Abuse. So we heard in detail last time about the community health projects and the 4 pillars. So that project has continued, is going really, really well. Health talked in detail about the focus on frailty and cardiovascular disease. And you'll see from the slides the interaction and engagement that we've had on those projects. In terms of the activities that are monitored, these are some of the measures used to establish the impact that those interventions are having. Again, we're continuing to have really good engagement from residents. Professionals are talking really positively about the changes that are seen amongst those that are participating. Last time we heard from Health about the projects within locally within Oxmoor. You'll see that the data has remained the same. So these projects were dormant during the summer months, just while the schools broke. They're back up and running. So in Q3, we'll hear a bit more detail about what's happened. And again, last time when we came, we talked very briefly about Workwell. So we're delighted to advise that following the meeting, we received confirmation that we had been successful in our submission of interest to operate the Workwell Hub. So this is a joint initiative between DWP and Health. So it is literally hot off the press in that Alison and I have been through the recruitment process and appointed a new Workwell advisor who started with us on Tuesday. So Alex will work specifically with residents who are referred or self-refer and who are at risk of being out of work because of health, or who are signed off of work because of health issues, and work on a one-to-one basis to get them back into work as quickly as possible. And there's just a kind of step-through process in terms of how that Workwell coach will work with those individuals. There's huge evidence around the longer that somebody is off work, the less likely they are to return. So it's a really important initiative, and we're really excited to get going on that. So in terms of the work that we're doing around domestic abuse, for those of you that aren't aware, the District Council, as part of the Community Safety Partnership, has statutory responsibilities around domestic homicide reviews. So domestic homicide review is necessary when there's been a death as a result of a relationship between a member of the same family or as a partner or somebody that is known to the individual. Across Huntingdonshire, since the legislation came in 2012, there have been 8 deaths that have met the definition of a domestic homicide review. So we have commissioned a piece of work around looking at the action plans that come out of domestic homicide reviews. So as part of the process, once a review is commissioned, partners are involved, they provide the information, and recommendations are made that then form an action plan with timescales. It's a very lengthy process. It has huge benefits that help professionals to learn about how could we prevent a similar incident happening in the future. The reason we've commissioned the work around the action plans is because once an action plan is approved, there is no requirement to ensure that those actions are fulfilled. And we really want to ensure that when there has been such a tragedy, that we in Huntingdonshire are making sure that we're following through on those. At the next meeting, we'll bring back some further information about how that review has gone. And if anybody would like to hear more about that process, then I'm happy to share further information. So just in terms of the work that we've been doing, in addition to the review of the action plans, we have published some dedicated member guidance on domestic abuse. We put articles into the town and parish newsletter. We're running a Bags for Help initiative, and we're also planning for the 16 days of action that are forthcoming in November. So in terms of our community chest, you saw that in Q1, we received and supported 10 applications and awarded over £12,000. During Q2, we only had 2 panel meetings, so the panel didn't meet in August, but still managed to award nearly £8,500. Some of the projects that were funded during Q2 was the Huntingdon clothes swap, so that is the upcycling of clothes and ensuring that they get out to families that need them. That's also linked to our swimwear project. So you may have seen the bin within the district council, within the leisure centres. So that is encouraging the upcycling of swimwear to ensure that families can access our swimming pools. Another project is Christmas Tree Festival in Great Paxton and a carbon saving initiative for allotment association in the Raveleys. So a huge variety of projects that we're funding and we continue to welcome those applications, and also an opportunity if anybody would like to visit some of those projects. We'll be doing some visits throughout Q3. In terms of our support to refugees, just a lovely photo there of a get-together for our Homes for Ukraine guests as well as hosts, and some information there about the support that continues to be given to those people. Over Q2, we've seen people move into new properties, help secure employment, as well as assist people where there has been breakdown in the relationship between guest and host. All of this work helps contribute to the costs around temporary accommodation. So we have a very little use for TA linked to our refugees. Our food support, so we have a number of food banks and community fridges that operate across Huntingdonshire. When we reported in Q1, the data that was available only came from the Oxmoor, and you'll see in Q2 that the data that is provided has come from a number of other places. So the Oxmoor Community Fridge, Yaxley Community Fridge, and the Pantry by Diamond Hampers. And you'll see that the number of families that have been helped during Q2 and the number of meals provided is absolutely amazing. So that is food that would have otherwise gone to landfill, being distributed to those that need it the most. So just over to you, Alison.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for having us. So I lead the resident advice team, and as you can see, the figures for Q2, July was a very busy month for us. I think that was somewhat to do with the summer holidays, but we just had an awful lot of inquiries and contacts for our residents. Not sure what happened, but they keep coming. The figures on there, at the moment, we can't record how many people we close their case each month, and that's just due to the basic system that we are using. We are going to get a shiny new system very quickly. So hopefully, probably for Q4, we'll be able to record that type of information for you so you can see how many people we have actually kind of dealt with and moved on. You can see the time spent on calls is that's in hours. So that doesn't include the time that we spend doing the paperwork or the referrals afterwards, or maybe getting up, going to speak to our colleagues in housing or council tax. So that is literally just the time spent on the phones. We've recently started recording our referrals out to other organisations, and you can see those figures in July, August and September. Can you move on? So they're a little bit confusing, and I'm going to try and do them in a better way for the next quarter, but you can see along the bottom you've got the different colours relate to the different months, and then you've got customer services, which you can clearly see is our biggest source of referral at the moment. We get them from DWP, we get some self-referrals. The professional referrals are social prescribers currently. You can see on there we've got CAB at the top with none. We've recently, in the end of October, introduced them referring back to us, which wasn't something we could do before because we didn't have a data sharing agreement in place, but they've now put that in place, and they can see the benefit of people will call their helpline and not have come to us, but they can't deal with everything just because there might be a blocker in the way that they deal with things. They don't go out and do home visits. They can't get someone in the office necessarily just to fill in a form. So they've seen the benefit in referring back to us for some of the problems. They might deal with part of it. So you will see some referrals on the next quarter, and then hopefully quarter 4, there'll be a nice big chunk as well. So issue on presentation. This is a difficult one to capture because a lot of people will come to us and they'll say, I need this, 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 or they'll just say, I need some food. And you'll be like, okay, what else is going on? They generally just tell us what happens to be the most important thing to them at that time. So it's the ones on there, you can see mental health is quite high, housing, food and finances, food alone, and finances on its own, sorry. And what we often find is what they tell us at the start is not the actual root cause of it. And by the time we've had a bit of a chat and said, okay, you need some food, what's going on? It'll all come out, I've lost my job, or I've got a very low hours, low paid job. It's just not stretching far enough. So then we can tackle the first issue that they present to us with, and then we can move on and do the root causes where possible. We can't solve everyone's problems, but we certainly have a little go. Okay, so rather than us kind of like writing reams and reams about what we do with some of the people, we've given you a little kind of snapshot on here, and then I'm going to explain a little bit more about each case. So we've got the case at the top. Gent came to us with lots and lots of disabilities, and he relied on his scooter to get around, to go and do his shopping, have his independence. And he said it's his lifeline, and without it, he was actually in tears because he didn't know how he was going to charge it. He was just struggling with his bills. He was also finding it very hard to pick up the phone, get through to his energy company, and it was just all far too much for him. So he came into us, and one of the advisors, Kelly, sat with him. She kind of said, right, what's going on? We worked out what his income was, what he was spending his money on, and it turned out that his electric was on emergency. I don't know how much people know about like top-up meters. People get a certain amount of credit on it. When that runs out, then it goes into what's called emergency credit. When that runs out, it cuts off. Unless you're on a specific meter, you've got a priority need, and then it will stay on until the next morning when they think reasonably you can get out of the house to go and top it up. So this gent was stuck in the situation. He didn't have much money left for food or energy. His electricity was going to run out that evening, and he literally was crying downstairs in Pathfinder. So Kelly sat with him, called the electricity company with him. He started talking to them, which he was too scared to do because he thought they were going to say, no, I can't help. But he was also scared of what would happen if he didn't get help. And it turned out the energy company were very good. They gave him a certain amount of credit on his meters. And then every time he topped up over a certain period of weeks, they were going to take a small amount back to pay for what they'd lent him. So he went away happy because he would be able to charge his scooter, he would be able to get out, and we also gave him some advice to help around his finances so that he wouldn't get into that kind of mess and upset again. Then we have case number 2. This gent, he'd had a really good job in marketing. I think he was earning around £40,000. He got made redundant and he got himself another job. He was delivering packages, but it's obviously not comparable to what he was earning before. His outgoings, he couldn't cut down as quickly as that. So he was really struggling. He actually came to us via a social prescribers referral because he'd been seeking help for stress and depression from the doctors. So he came to us, and again, we talked to him, what do you want to do? How do you see yourself getting out of this? Like, what can we do to help you? So he was talking about there were jobs where he was working for HVG, I can't say it now, sorry, heavy goods drivers, but he couldn't afford to pay for the license to do that. He just didn't have the money. So we did a bit of Googling and we spoke to him and sat him down, and we found something that he could take back to his employer and say, look, if you're willing to fund this, I could do that. I could go on the course, I could pass, and then I can fill one of the gaps you've got that you currently are struggling to fulfill because they couldn't get drivers with the license. So he contacted us a few weeks later and said that he'd spoke to his employer. He was on the course as we spoke, and he was on course to be able to get his license, get a better paid job where it wasn't going to be quite comparable with his old wage, but it was much more on a par. And he now isn't using food banks and he's able to earn his own money. He feels a lot more happy in himself, and he's not seeking so many appointments from the doctor because he's feeling a lot more fulfilled. And then we've got the last case. This gent came to us during the flooding that we had recently. He was actually one of the residents that was trapped just because of where the floodwater was. He has some sort of blood disorder, and he normally has nurses go in, do his blood tests, go off, give him the results, they ring him up, tell him when he can go to the hospital for his blood transfusion. Without the transfusions, he starts to feel very ill very quickly. He lives alone. It was quite dangerous. And the part of the community action team had knocked on the door, discovered him, and then they were like, can you see what you can do to help him? So we spoke to him. We said, right, come on, what can we sort out? How does this hospital appointment work? So with a few conversations back and forwards to the hospital, they said, let's not worry about the blood test. If you can get him here tomorrow, we can do the blood transfusion. So then we had a few conversations with us and the emergency team, which was Neil Sloper at the time, and we'd kind of come up with a plan that our community action team could go through the floodwater with one of our big vehicles, and they could pick him up, bring him out. We could get the hospital transport to pick him up. So we'd got all that almost ready when the floodwaters kind of decided to go down, and his neighbour was like, oh, it's all right, I think I can get him out. So he actually managed to get out to his appointment the next day, because at the point where we were talking to him, he was already feeling very lightheaded, very weak, and it was obvious that if something wasn't done quite quickly, he was going to be needing the fire brigade going through an ambulance to get him out to hospital. We move on. So it's kind of all very well us sitting here and saying, yep, we've done all this really nice work, but it's quite nice for us to be able to do some costs for you so you can understand in money what work we're doing. So this one, it does say that it relates to the first guy on the other one. It's actually a different couple, because the first gent didn't really have costs that we could kind of understand, because we don't know how much time and money that we can kind of put a cost on it from the electricity company helping him. So this was another couple that needed our help. They were seeing the GP, they'd been relying on food banks, and they were really struggling with money, and they were told, yep, go online, you can apply for some stuff, but wife was caring for husband who'd got disabilities, she really couldn't do that. So what happened was we spent about 2 hours of our time with them and helped them fill out forms. Turns out they could get attendance allowance, which came to around £450 a month. And what that means is they're now getting that, and all the figures are on here for the month and the year. They're now getting that amount of money. They can afford to pay for their food. They don't need food bank, and the wife's not as anxious and upset, so she's not accessing GP. So on here, if you look, you can see that the food parcel is around £40 per person, like for a couple, for a 1 or 2 person. You can only have up to 6 per 6 months. So in reality, that's around £480 a year. So by the time you took off our costs, our hourly wage for the couple of hours, that's a saving of £454 for the food banks. The residents gaining around £5,500, and then an average GP appointment costs about £56. So say she had 3 or 4, you're saving another £200 and a demand on the GP. So the gent who was needing the HGV licence, we spent about 3 hours with him, so that's about £40. He'd been accessing the food banks. And different food banks in different areas are slightly different costs, which is why it's not the same on both sides. So our time out of the food bank cost has saved around £430 a year, and he is now able to support himself because he's on a higher wage. And again, he was accessing the GP appointments, so we're saving kind of £50-ish every time he would have gone to the doctors. And him in himself is so much happier, his mental health happier, and he's more resilient now because he's got the ability to earn more money and support himself going forwards. And then the last one, our little Jen, who potentially, if we hadn't have intervened, he would have ended up in the hospital. So I did find some costs from the NHS this morning to be able to do this. So our intervention, I couldn't put how much the other members of the community action team would cost because I actually don't know that without asking a probing question about how much they earn per hour. So we've saved at least £550 plus the treatment that he would have needed because I didn't have the cost of a blood transfusion. So although they're very simple, it does give you an idea that our intervention, although it sounds all fluffy and nice, there is a physical cost, and there is, by us kind of like dealing with just these three, then they're not putting so much stress on the GPs, so it's releasing them up to see other people as well. I think that's the end of my bits. I don't know if anyone wants to do questions now or at the end.
Would you like to do questions now? Anyone got any questions? We'll wait for the presentation then.
Perfect.
Thanks, Alison. And I think to say, just in terms of those case studies, something that the team are consistently seeing is the high number of male callers that are calling in and asking for that help. And also people who are struggling with online forms. They don't know which is the correct form, they don't know which offer to go to, and often will find themselves going round and round in circles. So even though the information is there, it's what is the right information to ensure that the person gets to the right place. And once they get to a point where they are stuck, they'll just put it to one side and bury their head in the sand and hope that the problem goes away. And that's something that we are consistently seeing. So now I'll hand over to Dorcas, who's just going to talk through from a service design perspective.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you, Alison, and other previous presenter for the sharing. My name is Dorcas, and I'm a service design officer with the community teams. And currently, I work very closely with the residents, advice, and information teams to improve our service by applying service design methodologies. Today, I will explain how we are implementing service design methodology within our team. So, over the next 12 months, we will conduct a comprehensive review of the RAI service, identify areas for improvements, and implementing change to enhance service delivery for our residents. As part of the review, I'm glad to have a chance to work together very closely with all the amazing resident advisor sitting in on team meetings, observing hot desk phone in, and also outreach activities, providing insights into our daily practice and operations. By applying tools such as journey mapping and personal creating, we gain a clear understanding of our service delivery, identify any inefficiency or pain points. So this kind of visual approach helps us to pinpoint opportunities for improvements, and also using both qualitative and quantitative research, we can translate our finding into actionable change that's evidence-based and impactful. My role also involves articulating the service improvement, clarity, defining changes needed from a user perspective and also in a systematic level. No matter the change we implement, we must keep the residents in the heart of our redesign process. We also aim to make our investment cost-effective and also efficient. Additionally, we are focusing on promoting accessibility to ensure residents are well-informed about our services and also empowered to access support and self-help resources as needed. Beyond our research and also the positive change that we are making, We are also adapting new ways of working. So this allows us to, as service provider, to align our efforts with the council priorities and also continuously improve our identifying strengths and weaknesses in our service. Lastly, we are developing a self-help tools for our residents, enable them to access information and support independently. This contributes to empowering individuals, helping them to navigate different stages of their lives with increased autonomy. Thank you. So as a service designer within the RAI team, I constantly inspired by the dedications and also the enthusiasm of our team members and also all the positive progress we have made. A core part of our strategies involves structuralizing the process and also providing additional supports for our team members, establishing more structured work process and a long-term vision, while also managing daily operations is essentials for the sustainable growth. So following our initial findings, we are identifying several immediate areas that we can improve. For example, developing a formal standard operation procedure, SOP, can help advisor to standardize essential tasks and ensure consistent service qualities. By involving team members in the SOP development process, we can foster ownerships and strengthening our foundation for the long-term growth. Additionally, we are exploring transition design methodologies that will guide our team through meaningful, sustainable change and opening up future opportunities. Thank you. So looking ahead, our first report including, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. So looking ahead, our first report will include a finalized design brief, a 12-month work plan, and also research findings. We also plan to establish the service design lab to create a collaborative environment to support service design initiatives. The lab will bring both internal and external benefits, including the strengthening service design capacity within our team, enhancing collaboration with other stakeholders, and build trust in the design process. The lab sessions will be conducted weekly or bi-monthly within the team members and stakeholders invite to participate in co-design workshops, share updates, and also celebrate the progress and also the contribution of each of the participants. So over the next 12 months, my goals are deliver resident-centered services, understanding service needs to create evidence-based services that generally benefit the community, building service design capacity, cultivating a design mindset within our team, and also enhancing practical skills to support continuous improvement. Also strategies, positionings, and resources efficiencies. So collaboratively defining our team directions to optimize resources and align with the Huntingdon Shire District Council goals, ensuring sustainable enhancement for the futures. So thank you so much for your attention. And if you're interested in connecting or like learn more about service design, feel free to contact, and I'm happy to discuss service design in the futures. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorcas. And what we hope to bring back next time is the 12-month plan. So Dorcas's role is very much about coming in and being the critical friend to the resident advice and information team. So we'll talk, as part of that exploratory work, we'll talk to members of the team, but also residents that have worked with the team, yourselves, anybody that is really interested in being part of that process. So we're very excited to see that project progress.
Yeah.
So just finally from me in terms of our set of slides is the data that has come from Citizens Advice. So you heard last time in detail from Rob, who is one of the managers within Citizen Advice team, about the move to Pathfinder House. So they are now fully embedded and working alongside the Resident Advice and Information team. And what that has resulted in is some additional outreach sessions that they've been delivering. So are now providing more outreach across the district. So as well as the drop-in that they have here at the District Council on a weekly basis, they're having sessions in St Neots, St Ives, Ramsey, and we're looking to roll out a monthly one on Oxmoor. So really getting to people that need the help the most. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm so impressed. I'm blown away actually what the work you're doing. Anyone got questions or comments to make? Oh, let's start with Councillor McAdam.
With respect to people who are in serious problems and looking for help, should they go to Citizens Advice first, or should they start with Citizens Advice, or can they come direct to the council team?
Thank you. So in terms of the options that are available, historically, excuse me, historically people have reached out to Citizens Advice because it's a well-known, trusted offer. Where the Resident Advice and Information team comes in is that they have more time. So often CAB follow a process, so they will receive the call that the incoming call, they will work through what they are able to. But as part of that relationship, there is a requirement for the person to do certain things, provide certain information, and often the person may struggle to do that, so they will disengage. What the Resident Advice team offers is that time and persistence to try and find a solution to the problem that they're experiencing. So what we tend to find is people will come in via CAB initially, but actually they are better, they could receive better help via the Resident Advice team, so they will be passed on to them. If the individual comes in perhaps via customer services, they'll often be referred directly and straight to the Resident Advice team. Either way, it doesn't matter at the moment. So the resident, whether they come in via CAB or whether they come in straight to the Resident Advice team, because of the close working, we will make sure that they get to the place that they need to be and the right offer. The work that Dorcas is doing is looking at how the best bits of both of those offers and moving forward what any potential new offers could look like. What we are very conscious of is ensuring that there isn't that duplication, hence why the co-location is moving to prevent that.
I think just on that point, the way I see it is that residents shouldn't be expected to know how to navigate the system. Wherever they present, what we want to do is get to a position where the best person to help them they'll find that person really quickly. And so being in the same building really helps with that. But essentially, yeah, the service design part is how do we create the systems. I see Alison's role as entirely human. She's having a human response to people coming to her with complicated problems. And then how do we embed that innately human response to make sure we do it really well every time? And so to answer your question, it shouldn't matter, and that's what we're working towards.
Councillor Hassel?
Thank you, Chair. I have some comments and then I have a question as well. But yeah, firstly, I thought it was great, some quantification of the help. And I know it's really, really difficult, but I think, yeah, looking at it from a cabinet perspective, if I can put that hat on momentarily, is that it's quite difficult to know where you spend your money if there are things that are not measurable. So the more you can do to sort of measure and quantify, and sort of, it would perhaps be good next time around to see that on a wider scale. What I took from the latter presentation was there's going to be some business process re-engineering going on, and I would ask that that's done with compassion, because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of making this super, super efficient, but we lose that empathy and all those sort of things. So I hope we can trust you to do that. And then the question really was looking through, I noticed there's been quite a bit on the news about carers, and I noticed carers can now do more work. And I was just thinking, fortunately I'm not in that position at all, but I was thinking, if you are a carer, and I do know someone whose son is kind of a carer, who's sort of unemployed at the moment, it's how do they connect, and do we provide that kind of service for carers to perhaps, you know, get carers actual work, get them more work, and deal with their problems? That seemed to be a bit of a gap, but I'm probably completely wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Hassel. So at the last meeting, we talked about the UK SPF funding skills and employment offer. So we have a dedicated officer through Cambridgeshire Skills who is working in Huntingdonshire to support anybody who would like to receive more information and advice around skills, employment, education or training. So that is an outreach offer. So he is throughout the week is in different locations. I think what would be good is if that is an area that there is a need, we can work with him to push more on that. So he can help anybody who needs help, who needs that advice. But often we need to know where the people are and what it is that they need help with.
If I just come back on that, Joe, I just think it's one of those ones that I suspect is all-consuming, because you're doing little bits of work and then coming back and you're full-time in care when you get home, and you know, will you be able to get out to the council? So it just felt when I looked through the pack, that might be a bit of an area, and I don't know what the answer is, to be quite honest with you, because they're probably a bit hidden from our site. But if we can do anything to increase that visibility, and maybe it's something we as councillors can help with as well, if we see someone who's caring for someone and making sure they've got all the help they can get.
Can I suggest that we take that back to our skills advisor as a potential issue and ask that they come up with a proposal that we can share with you as a way forward?
Thank you.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Howell.
Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously some very valuable work going on helping our residents. And you mentioned obviously designing the system and how efficient we can make that system. And you mentioned stakeholders as well as using service, users to help us with that. And I suppose the holy grail is a whole system approach, isn't it? Not just, what we do here, but how we join up with stakeholders. And in some of the experiences I've got in the community, the GP practice is the weak link. You mentioned how some of the things we do save the GP's money. I'm not sure that that's reciprocated. And when you've got people saying, I can't get to see my GP for 3 weeks, there's a whole load of problems that are potentially going under the radar while they wait to see their GP. And of course, social prescribers have a great role to play, and some of those are connected to GP practices. So I just wondered, how comprehensive is the network of social prescribers, and how useful do we find those? And if there are gaps, how can we encourage more social prescribers if they can fill that gap between GP practices and the work that we do here?
Thank you, Councillor Criswell, and you make a really good point. And health are a key partner in what we're trying to do. So we have social prescribers based here at Pathfinder House, so working alongside Alison's team. So we have invested heavily in that relationship. We also have a monthly meeting with all partners, of which the social prescribers are part of that. So come together with all partners and just discuss the issues that they're facing, the issues that the residents are experiencing, emerging concerns, funding gaps, all of those types of things. The other breakthrough that we've made, I think, is our successful bid for the Work Well programme. So we will work with a specific group of surgeries. We've not really had, as the resident advice team, we've not, other than via the social prescribers, haven't sort of had that in. We now have a direct link into those surgeries to raise awareness in terms of the problems that our residents are experiencing. So actually, if the barrier is they really need to see a GP and they've not been able to see them, we can relay that information that is what is coming back from our residents. So as much as the relationship with the social prescribers is good, it's about, I think, getting that information directly into the surgeries as well. And we've now got that opportunity through the Work Well programme.
Thanks. I think my sort of response to your question is sort of zooming out as far as I can. So we know that the health system is really struggling financially, to put it mildly, and there's huge pressure on A&E and hospitals, and they're struggling with waiting lists. GPs, people are struggling to get appointments. As a council, we can sort of knock on that door and all the rest, chip away. But what's the effect that we can have? I think the profound effect we can have is, so there's a statistic that I hope I won't misquote. I think it's about 20% of GP appointments are actually medical, and most of them are to do with something else. And so actually, if we can get those something else's and bring them outside of the GP waiting list, perhaps to our RAY team, perhaps to CAB, or wherever else it might be, that reduces pressure on the GP practice, so people can get those GP appointments quicker. They're less likely to end up in A&E because they have it waiting for 2 weeks for the GP appointment. And actually, the system kind of just sort of realigns itself more efficiently to the right people are seeing the right people at the right time. And so what I hope we can begin to make some impact on that front, and we can demonstrate that impact through the work that Dorcas is doing, particularly that health sees the financial benefit to its own organisation, then we can create this virtuous circle where they'll see the benefit of what we're doing and perhaps even put some money towards it. But I think we've got to start somewhere. At the moment, it's about creating the systems that we're closer to at the moment, and hopefully that the ripples will go from there.
Thanks very much. So if I could just come back on that, where I see scrutiny could actually help is to say, so what are the hard nuts to crack? What are the gaps that we're struggling to solve, if you like? And how can scrutiny help in perhaps talking to stakeholders to say, how can we get more towards the whole systems approach? We've mentioned before, I don't think we do enough outside scrutiny. We're sort of constantly looking internally, whereas we ought to be talking more to, outside stakeholders. So if we could find out the problems that you've got in solving people's problems, perhaps scrutiny has a role to say, let's talk to some partners and see if we can have an input into that. That's just my suggestion, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Criswell. It's a good suggestion. Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good report. Thank you very much. It certainly improved my understanding. I guess you asked at the beginning of your presentation, Claudia, about some examples of some of the issues. So I want to talk about social prescribers. So I've had contact with quite a number of social prescribers over the last couple of months, and 99% of those inquiries from social prescribers to do with housing issues, where people have got housing issues, a plethora of housing issues. And what happens is the social prescriber contacts me and says, I'm representing Mr. and Mrs. Fred Bloggs. This is the issue. Can you help me? So I then go to housing and speak to the housing team, and then the housing team come back to me and tell them that, this is who you need to contact. I think we're overcomplicating it. The social prescribers just need to go straight to housing. Really, that's my experience. And then, because ultimately I'm delaying the email. So that's an observation, really, just for some feedback. And I absolutely share the frustration in relation to GP surgery. So I've had an elderly gentleman in my ward that has had a nasogastric tube fitted, and every time the nasogastric tube comes out, he can't get a GP's appointment. So he then rocks up at A&E. He's 80-something years old. He sits in A&E department for about 8 hours just to put a nasogastric tube back in his, and then he has to get home because there's no transport back to Sawtry from Huntingdon. So those are the real life issues, and I think Councillor Criswell's really echoed that. We're seeing it. We're all experiencing that, and I think it's important that we speak to our stakeholders so they understand that, really. And this is not to bang anybody's heads against the wall, because I think we all know the pressures. Councillor Pitts documented it really well about the financial pressures. This is about, you know, partnership working, getting everybody in the same room and saying, look, these are the challenges. How can we improve it within the district? And the example I give about social prescribers going to housing, you know, it's just a simple solution, but we just need to be able to do that, don't we? Because it just makes the process a lot easier for everybody, really. So they're my observations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to come back on a couple of things there. So I think relationships are built on relationships. So often when people move on and perhaps a new social prescriber comes in, that relationship is lost, that knowledge is lost. And so it's how do we prevent that from happening? So those relationships remain the same, the knowledge, the information remains the same despite people moving on, and that's something that we can certainly invest in and make sure happens. And just coming back to the point in that both Councillor Criswell and yourself make, Councillor Bywater, around the hard nuts for us to crack, I think it'd be really useful to hear your examples of what you're seeing in the community as well. So the example you've just given, Councillor Bywater, is so useful for us to say, this is ridiculous. You know, actually, that is a health problem that needs to be dealt with by a health professional. Actually, if you come to us with other examples where they're not, it doesn't need a health professional, and actually we can say to partners, well, we could pick that up, or another CAB could pick that up. And so we start sifting through the things that you are seeing and hearing from your residents as well around the problems and what are the delays, what are the barriers. And then it's about how do we make sure our residents have the confidence to go to the right people the first time. So that first point of contact, because they know that they can trust to get the outcome that they want. So they're not going to a GP for something that isn't a health problem. They can go to the resident advice team. So I think if we could, you know, the ask as well from us is, if you're hearing, please share some of those examples with us so that we can actually have that conversation and use that as evidence to go to the stakeholders and tackle them about it as well.
This is obviously a committee meeting. I don't want to go into the details. We can speak outside it, I guess. You know, I naturally assume, without this conversation in this committee, I naturally assume that once I've signposted someone from housing back to the social prescriber, that information then gets absorbed and, you know, we understand the issues, but quite clearly it isn't, is it? So I guess we need to get better at it, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I wanted to start to say a big thank you to the Residents Advice Team for the help for residents of Brampton during recent flooding. Did some great work there. Listening to some of the success stories mentioned within the presentation, it sounds like there's a real benefit for residents interacting in person at Pathfinder House. Now that Citizens Advice is based at Pathfinder House, can residents also get an initial meeting with them without ringing or booking online in advance, do you know?
Yeah, they can. They have drop-in sessions. I'm not sure if it's Monday or Tuesday, but they are definitely here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I can confirm the dates and times. If I send them to Becky, she can send them out to you guys so you've got them, and then you can signpost people. But they can just turn up, sit and wait and see Citizens Advice, or they can ring, book appointments to come in as well.
Councillor Hassel, finally.
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you in terms of the one of the scenarios that you put down. I think of the gentleman who required the hospital appointment. I think was probably my ward. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to very quickly pick up on Councillor Bywater and Councillor Criswell's point, because I think that it's not exactly the same, but I think we experience a similar situation in the flooding where we have so many agencies and finger pointing and not working together to deliver the outcome, and I see signs of that here. And if we can I think we should experiment with scrutiny to see whether we can make a change. I think maybe bringing people here and actually just not banging their head against a wall, but just saying, does this make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to us, I think might be helpful in getting better outcomes for residents.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you so much, team. Claudia, before you go, you mentioned that you could present more work on the domestic homicide. I'd be really interested to hear more in your next presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can bring that forward as a
Thank
focus
you.
for next time.
Thank you so much. And thank you, team, for your presentation, and Councillor Pitt. And that is the end of the meeting. Thank you. Can everyone stay?